Tonight, a political upheaval that just reshaped Canada's future. The 2025 federal election is over, but the aftershocks are only beginning. From Montreal, this is Night Talk, episode 31. I'm Gary MacDonald. Eddie?
And as usual, 4 floors up from Gary in Montreal, this is Eddie Tkalik.
And joining us tonight is our Atlantic Canada contributor, Wayne MacDonald. Wayne, welcome aboard again.
Hi, guys. Great to be here.
All right, this is ground zero for the 2025 political shakeup. Let's get into it. Let's start looking at the quake. You could say the first tremors were felt in early summer last year when the Liberals lost a safe seat in Toronto, as then Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's popularity and that of the Liberal Party was tanking. In the fall, another Liberal defeat in a Montreal area riding. This as a group of brave MPs began publicly calling for Trudeau's resignation. Then came the election of the current occupant of the Oval Office and talk of annexing Canada as the 51st state, followed by threats of a trade war. The new year started with the long-awaited and much-anticipated announcement by Trudeau he was stepping down. A Liberal leadership campaign, and along comes former chief banker Mark Carney grabbing the leadership. After being sworn in as Prime Minister, he wasted no time in calling an election for April 28th, and here we are. And that is, the last 5 to 6 months in a nutshell, really. And what a whirlwind it's been from a political standpoint. Any thoughts, guys, before we get into some of the other aspects of it?
To tell you the truth, I'm glad it's over, and we can move on with dealing with business in moving this country forward in this very difficult time in the world, as perpetuated by Herr Trump down south. So I'm looking forward to the Prime Minister of Canada making our country a progressive country with the rest of the world while we're establishing new relationships. Looking forward to it.
Wayne, any thoughts?
Well, yeah, I actually thought the campaign was much longer than the number of days they said it was. It seemed to be, for a short campaign, it seemed to be a long campaign in many ways. But, it's as Eddie said, it's time to settle down, and hopefully parties will come together when we deal with some of the major issues, especially with the issue with the U.S. and tariffs, and, put the party differences aside and work as one unified entity with the premiers and trying to tackle and get this straightened out with the tariffs and some other issues as well. So, it is a minority government, and it's going to take probably some, behind the scenes work and to try and keep things moving along and not get caught up in partisan objections.
Yeah, for
Okay.
sure.
Before we get into the numbers, I can't believe that we ended up with a minority government, but we did. I really felt going into this campaign, and still do, that we needed a solid majority government, whether it was Liberal or Conservative. We needed a majority government for the next 4 years, because we know what minority parliaments are like, and you can get some good legislation through, but given the circumstances, there are times that decisions have to be made, and they have to be made in a hurry, and you don't have time for the niceties or the drama of going back into the House of Commons and trying to bring enough votes on side to support you without the threat of a non-confidence motion that you could lose hanging over your head while you're trying to do some of this business. And if you don't think that the man sitting in the Oval Office is not going to try to take advantage of this situation, because he would see it as a form of weakness, some blood in the water, and he'll go in like a shark. So, I'm sorry that we ended up with the minority government, and to be so close, like 3 seats away. However, that's the way it went down, and so now we have to live with it. And hopefully, Carney's leadership style can bring some sense to it all. So let's just do a quick rundown here. Where did we go? All right. So as I just mentioned, the Liberal Party under Mark Carney came up with 169 seats. They ended up with 43.7% of the popular vote. The Conservative Party, led by Pierre Poilievre, came up with 144 seats and a 41.3% share of the popular vote. The Bloc Québécois, Yves-François Blanchet, 22 seats here in Quebec, 6.3% of the popular vote. New Democratic Party, Jagmeet Singh, 7 seats, the worst showing in the party's history, 6.3% of the popular vote. In the Green Party, Elizabeth May, she's in, and any other Green candidates, including the co-leader, are out, and he resigned today. And they garnered 1.3% of the popular vote. Now, the Liberals' victory was attributed to a surge in nationalist sentiment, partly in response to US President Trump's aggressive trade policies and controversial remarks about Canada. For the Conservatives, gains and setbacks. The Conservatives increased their seat count by 24. Leader Pierre Poilievre, though, lost his long-held seat in Carleton to Liberal candidate Bruce Fanjoy. The NDP declined. Well, they suffered their significant losses, dropping to 7 seats and losing official party status. Leader Jagmeet Singh lost his seat in Burnaby Central and announced his resignation. Bloc Québécois setback. Well, the Bloc Québécois saw a reduction of 11 seats, bringing their total to 22, but still a solid number to hold a bit of an upper hand at times when need be. Somehow,
and if I'm not mistaken, Gary, I think two or three of those Bloc Québécois seats did not flip Liberal; they flipped Conservative.
Yeah.
So you know what? Quebec had a big say in terms of whether or not Canada would have a majority government or not. I mean, that's 2 or 3 votes right there.
That's right. And somehow on the other side of it, I can't see Blanchet working with whoever they appoint as the House leader, or the interim House leader, because Poilievre says he's not resigning. And we'll get into that in a little bit as well, because I don't think that's going to be the case whatsoever. Right. And as I mentioned, the Green Party secured only 1 seat, and that was it. So Prime Minister Mark Carney expected to form a cabinet and address key issues such as trade relations with the U.S., economic stability, and national unity. So there are actually a couple of scheduled recounts that we're aware of. One is Terra Nova, the peninsulas in Newfoundland and Labrador, where the Liberal candidate, Anthony Germain, a former CBC journalist, came out with 19,704 votes, 47.9% of the popular vote. And the Conservative candidate, Jonathan Rowe, 19,692 votes, or 47.94% of the popular vote. Very close there. And then Terrebonne here in Quebec, the Liberal candidate, about 35 votes ahead of the Bloc Québécois candidate. So those are 2 candidates. Oh yeah, the margin in Newfoundland was 12 votes too. So those are 2 where there are scheduled recounts. And I believe they have a certain amount of time if anyone else wants to file for a recount, but that window is closing quickly. So again, it was close in a lot of areas. There's no doubt about it. Some of these ridings, the way they squeaked out. So Wayne, let's talk a little bit about Atlantic Canada.
Atlantic Canada. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, and how things shaped up, because you're living in a riding that was considered a bellwether riding for the way the election would go, and it kind of worked out again.
Yeah, and it actually wasn't even close. The Liberal candidate, David Miles, he got almost double the votes that the Conservative candidate, Brian MacDonald, who was a former MLA for the Conservatives. It really wasn't even close. So as a bellwether riding, I guess you could say that it sided with who the government formed. But in the Atlantic provinces overall, first off, the amount of people that voted in across the country was higher than the last few elections. PEI in particular led the country with 78 point almost 80% of eligible voters voting. So that tells you that you know in the Atlantic provinces and the Maritimes we like to take our politics seriously, and that showed here. But the thing too that, and it showed in other areas of the country. But what I noticed in here in the Maritimes in particular was that when I joined the TV channels a few minutes into the results being reported, and I was hearing the commentators saying, well, the Conservatives must be taking solace in looking at the number of seats they're leading in, whatever. And I thought, oh, gee, it's kind of surprised me based on what I was hearing and talking to people. But as the night went on, it became obvious that the longer the vote went on and the more polls that started to report, as you got towards the final polls, that is when the Liberals started to catch up and pass whoever was in front of them. And one of the seats I was looking at closely was Sean, the PEI was the cabinet minister. Gary, give me a hand there. Just drew blank. Anyway, whatever.
Are you thinking of Sean Fraser? No, he was
Yeah.
in Nova Scotia.
I'm sorry, Sean Fraser. Yep.
Yeah.
Elmer McKay's old writing. Yep. And he came in on the Trudeau wave of 2015 in a very strong conservative writing, and then he held it the next two elections after that. And as you know, that he announced in December that he was not going to run again, that he was going to spend more time with family. And of course, that was before the announcement that Mr. Trudeau was not going to run again. Now, in March, he, after a phone call with Mr. Carney, apparently, he decided he was going to run again. And all night long, for most of the night, he was running behind the Conservative candidate by as much as 500 votes at one point in time, and for a long period of time. And then it was 400, then 300, then 200, and it kept getting closer. And they're getting to the final polls in terms of counting. And suddenly, they were talking about somewhere else in the country, and they came back, and suddenly he's ahead. And he ended up winning by 500 votes. And it was the last few polls, and they were the advanced polls that really, caught him up to the Conservative and put him over the top. And that happened in a number of ridings as well. It wasn't until those last polls were being counted that the winners were being shored up, and mostly those turned out to be Liberal winners. So I guess the Liberals banked their vote, if you want to call it that, in the advanced polls. And it was quite interesting to see this sort of transpire. The other interesting thing, too, was that, and maybe you're going to talk about this later, but in Nova Scotia, for example, Poilievre made one stop during the campaign. It was in the last week of the campaign. It was probably about a week ago. And the only Conservative candidate to win in Nova Scotia, they lost two other seats to the Liberals, was quoted in the CBC as saying that, it was too bad that Mr. Poilievre waited so late to make his appearance in Nova Scotia, knowing that they were very close in a couple of ridings and that there was the possibility of one or two being overturned or flipped to the Liberals, and that he did make the statement he thought nobody should give up their seat to let Mr. Poilievre run in a seat vacated by somebody willing to do that. So I found that interesting. The other thing it's interesting too, and it will reflect it when you probably talk later about Ontario. But Tim Houston, the Premier of Nova Scotia, who went in November with a what they call it, the supermajority, that he made an announcement that he was not going to get involved in the federal election, that he was leaving that to the feds to decide, and he would not be appearing with Mr. Poilievre nor making any comments in that regard. And sure enough, he did not show up at the only stop that Mr. Polyev made in Nova Scotia, even though it was right next door to his home riding. Now, there seems to be a little information simmering that when Tim Houston was running for premier in November, he had indicated that that he was not going to ask for any appearances by the federal Conservatives, and that he was a member of the Progressive Conservative Party of Nova Scotia, and the Conservative Party of Canada was a different, basically, entity. And so that he was, he was not asking the feds to come in and help him or boost him up. And with that, there was, the CBC said they had 4 sources they couldn't name, and I think, it's been well reported after that, but Mr. Polyev's campaign officer, chief campaign officer, Jenny Byrne, made a call to Houston's team saying that if Mr. Polyev went on to become prime minister, that they would not lift a finger to help Tim Houston and his Conservatives. So that set off a little bit of animosity, if you want to call it that, or ill feeling towards the two parties. I don't think Mr. Houston regards the Progressive Conservatives as a party in Nova Scotia the same as the Conservatives, without the progressive word in front of it, that the feds have. And he's also become quite chummy with Premier Ford in Ontario, and they've met a few times. They seem to like each other. They get along, and they were the first 2 provinces to actually come to an agreement on free trade between the 2 provinces. And as Tim Houston has said on a number of occasions, he's all in on free trade right across the country, and he's going to work hard to see that happen. So I think it's kind of interesting that Mr. Houston is separating himself from the federal Conservatives, maybe in particular Mr. Polyev, but I think in general the whole party. And the night before Mr. Polyev made his only stop in Nova Scotia, Premier Houston released a video based on the "My Name is Joe and I Am Canadian" video. Only it was, he gave some things related to Nova Scotia. For example, he said, Nova Scotians know that you go to Piggy's Cove, which is a major tourist attraction on the coast of Nova Scotia, with an iconic lighthouse and the waves and the rocks. But he said, Nova Scotians know that you go to Piggy's Cove as much for the gingerbread as you do for the view. And a few other things like, in Nova Scotia, we give directions, even referencing landmarks that no longer exist. And he went through that. And at the end, he said, my name is Tim Houston, and I am a Nova Scotian. And, the political pundits were making a deal out of this, saying, okay, is this a message being sent? The timing seems, a little suspicious in the sense it's the night before Mr. Polyev arrived. And does he have ambitions for anything higher than Nova Scotia? Now, he denied that his focus is Nova Scotia. But he did weigh in when Mr. Blanchette made reference to Canada being an artificial country. And he did post something on X about criticizing Mr. Blanchette for saying that, and even a copy of a letter he wrote to him saying, if you have a problem with this country, then step aside and basically don't run for an office in this country. So lots of interesting stuff in the Atlantic provinces and the Maritimes. So I just thought I would give you a little bit of information.
Yeah, that is interesting in the way that Houston really did distance himself from the Conservative Party of Canada, which, as we know, was a blend of the former Progressive Conservatives and the Reform Party. And a lot of Progressive Conservatives were bitter then, and they remain bitter about the way that this has come together. And then to have Harper as a leader initially, and then eventually Polyev as leader, from Western Canada, and we know that there are certain sentiments in Western Canada translating to some disdain for Eastern Canada. And so, I think that party, and especially after this defeat, I think I said last week that Poilievre has to start looking over his shoulders, or he should be looking over his shoulder, because the Tories are hell bent on self-destruction whenever they suffer a loss, and even when they win, sometimes the win is not strong enough, and they get the old Tory blue long knives out and just start slamming the leader in the back and getting rid of them, and that's why it's surprising to hear Poilievre challenging them when he stands up on stage in his speech on Monday night and says he's not going anywhere. Basically, I'm here, I'm going to lead, and we're going to get through this. And it's in a clip that I'm going to be playing in a few minutes. But yeah.
Well, one of the things, Gary, that he emphasized was that the popular vote that they got increased. It was higher than when Stephen Harper got his majority. But you can say that, but in context, this basically was a two-party race. So yeah, definitely. The vote's going to be higher. The popular vote's going to be higher because, the populace was concentrating on two parties. The Liberal popular vote was the highest since 1980. I think, I forget which prime minister it was, but it's been a long time since they got that high as well. So, and they did carry the popular vote. So when you say, oh, well, we got 41% of the popular vote, the highest since 1988, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, okay, but it was a two-party race, and you were still several points behind the winner. And he lost his own seat. And I'm not sure. The other thing, too, I mean, you're going to get to this later, I'm sure, but, the advertisements on TV in the past week, the last week of the campaign, and this was commented on in the media, but you can notice yourself, he was no longer appearing in them. In fact, he even had Harper in some of them instead of Poilievre.
Yep.
And I think when I see that, and I read in the media to the pundits or listen on some of the broadcasts, there's a message there from inside the party that, well, maybe you're not, the leader is not being seen as the grabber that they need. Let's just back that off a bit and put a different ad out. And I think that says something about internally what thinking may have been at the time and where it's probably at now, especially when he did not win his own seat. So, Gary and Eddie, you and I have been around a long time, and we've seen in politics, no party is particularly forgiving, but it seems that the Conservatives are less forgiving than other parties, as Gary had mentioned. Yeah. So it's going to be interesting to see what plays out in the next few days with respect to the leadership there as well.
So we have a couple of comments to catch up on. Elizabeth writes, "Hey guys, hope you're happy with the outcome. If I lived in Canada, I would be." And then she followed it up with this. This is interesting. "Eddie, when I congratulated my mum, these were her words. The first time I saw his face, I liked him. That's an 83-year-old talking. Love her." So she obviously a big Mark Carney fan.
Well, you know what it is, Gary. First impressions are remarkably important, and then you got to follow up with actually displaying what your true blue character is, right? I mean, I don't know how many shows that you and I had done since this whole Trudeau fiasco, and then Carney coming into the picture. We continuously kept on saying, "Would the real Mark Carney please step forward? Please show yourself." And as the campaign progressed, as he became leader of the Liberal Party, as he became Prime Minister of Canada, as he went into the campaign, I think both you and I can agree that just side conversations, that we saw more and more and more of Prime Minister Carney coming out, his character. We both saw during the debate while we watched it. We saw it in follow-up news interviews. He did a piece at Tim Hortons with the host of this Canadian comedy show. This hour has 22 minutes, and you actually saw a human and a very light side of Prime Minister Carney. So over the course of time, the real Prime Minister Carney has really popped up. A, he can be tough when he needs to. B, when he does start speaking a position of importance for Canadians, he'll speak up, namely Comrade Trump down south. I think all of this actually did unify the country somewhat, although it may not necessarily represent itself in the election because both parties, the PC and Liberals, increased their seat counts. Doesn't necessarily mean that conservatives don't have a sense of trust in Carney. They just thought that the platform for the PC was more beneficial to them than not. I'm speaking, but I'm speaking in terms of voters, but. I think Mr. Carney really did a great job in identifying himself with the Canadians, whether they voted Liberal or whether they voted PC. And I think it's something I read not too long ago, and I think I sent you an article on that, where there was an op-ed that basically said this is the first time in a very long time we had two qualified candidates that equally could lead the country, and Canada chose one. That's the way I'm looking at it. So, I think Carney did a great job. I think Mr. Poilievre kind of faltered towards the end, in my opinion. Since the debate, he kind of lost it. He lost his momentum. I would say to some degree, and I think at the same time you got to look at his seat. He did not win his electorate.
No.
That
And
says a
there's about a
lot about
5,000 vote
yeah,
majority in favor of the
yeah,
Liberal.
and that says a lot in terms of wow, did I just not pay attention to what my constituents were saying or trying to say? Was he just on the prime ministerial horse and forgot about everything else? Because I'm sorry, Gary, this is a damning blow to his. I'm not going to say ego. It's a damning blow to his career because A, we all saw what happened. He lost his electorate. B, we're already seeing the long knives coming out within his own party, and people are already after him. So big blow for him. You know what? Unfortunately, we don't have a majority government, but I think that's where Carney's strength is going to come in as someone who's been stabbed in the back multiple times, both as governor of the Bank of Canada and governor of the Bank of England. I think he's going to be able to deal with these knives coming out at him. They're going to come from everywhere. And B, I think he knows as a financier when to hold out a hand and work with people to drive towards a goal, which is obviously going to have to do with some discussions with PC pundits and definitely conversations with Bloc Québécois Blanchette for sure. It's not easy, not going to be easy, but I think he's going to have an easier time of it than Trudeau did, trying to toll on the dead weight of the NDP behind him. So good luck to him, and I still remain very excited by the prospects of this country over the next few years at least.
Now, looking back, one of the first major tremors before this quake of an election was called, of course, was the election of the man in the Oval Office now, who shall remain nameless in my side of it. And, and everything he started throwing almost from the get-go. And then, once he was sworn in officially. So he didn't let up. He backed off after a phone call between Carney and himself, just after Carney had won the leadership and then was sworn in as prime minister. And as expected, there are two different versions of what was said in that phone call. So that's we've come to expect that from the U.S. president. But on Monday, people getting up, and if they happen to be turning on the TV or turning on the radio, they were greeted, or they were checking. They, like me, have a link to Truth Social just to pop in and see what he's up to. They were confronted with this. His post on Truth Social. Good luck to the great people of Canada. Elect the man who has the strength and wisdom to cut your taxes in half, increase your military power for free to the highest level in the world, have your car, steel, aluminum, lumber, energy, and all other businesses quadruple in size with zero tariffs or taxes. If Canada becomes the cherished 51st state of the United States of America. No more artificially drawn line from many years ago. Look how beautiful this landmass would be. Free access with no border. All positives with no negatives. It was meant to be. America can no longer subsidize Canada with the hundreds of billions of dollars a year that we have been spending in the past. It makes no sense unless Canada is a state. So let me do a fact check on the last two lines there. America can no longer subsidize Canada with the hundreds of billions of dollars a year that we have been spending in the past. You're not subsidizing. That's the trade balance, trade deficit that has been running. Nobody forced you to have buyers seeking that amount of goods from us in our marketplace. So that's purely your decision as to whether your market likes what we're producing and can't get it in the US, or likes what we're producing versus what they can get in the US. That's not our problem. It's not a subsidy. It's a trade deficit. You're not spending a dollar on us that goes into our government as far as you directly putting money in. This is all economics. It's all market driven. It has nothing to do with anything that your government is doing. And you're starting to feel the effects of the tariffs that you have put on Canadian goods, as well as the Chinese goods and some of the other countries. When you have 2 or 3 of the top CEOs walk into your office and tell you, you have 2 weeks before our shelves are bare. And you notice he's backing off again. So,
Well, and also you look at what he posted. Who's he speaking to here? I mean, who's he directing this towards? He's not directing this towards you because we see right through it. Not directing it towards people like me because I see right through it. Who's he directing this to?
the base.
His magamites. His
Yep.
magabites will
Yep.
sop up everything he says, regardless if there's any truth to it. Absolutely. And I think your clarification of the last 2 points is 100%. Now, you think those 2 points you made in clarifying what he said ever made it to his magamites? You think they'd actually listen to you?
Well, that's the other side. And I saw
right.
a reporter doing an interview with a woman who went to Trump's rally somewhere in Michigan last night.
Right.
And it was to celebrate his first 100 days in office. And she said, well, yes, I've lost some money, but it's for the greater good because in the long run, I'll make that back and then some. I think he's doing a wonderful job.
Mm-hmm.
And this woman looked like she was either on the verge of retirement or retired. And she's, thinking that she's buying into the Kool-Aid that, this is, the little bit of pain, but it's all going to work out. Well, ask the CEOs of Target and Home Depot and Walmart how it's working out. You're about to find out. And now Amazon was looking at putting on the U.S. pages the regular price of the good and then adding showing what the tariffs would be. They backed away from it. And Trump's press secretary, I think it was yesterday, just said the only response was that Amazon is evil.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, right away they jump on. Well, why didn't they do that when inflation was climbing during Biden's term? Well, that was inflation that had absolutely nothing to do with any sort of a policy or any sort of decisions that Biden had made in parallel, in contrast to what Trump is doing with the economy and market manipulation. 2 different things. But again, the MAGA-mites go, oh yeah, that must be true because it's coming from her.
Yeah.
Like, what are you going to do? It's like, you know, I guess we have just, I guess everyone, down in the United States, common sense and level-headed politician and people, and us here up in Canada, we just have to look at the fact that, while Kaiser Trump is still in charge down in the United States, we're still going to have to keep on bumping our heads into the wall,
Yeah.
no matter how hard we speak, because it doesn't matter what we say in terms of absolute common sense thing. 1 + 1 is equal to 2, and not 2.5 because somebody says so. It's just so difficult to have respectful conversations with a lot of these MAGA-mites. I mean, albeit I've seen some interviews online in social media and whatnot and streams where you have true blue Democrats speaking to true blue Republicans and actually having active and valid conversation in terms of what they see the Republicans can do for the country. And then you have we agree to disagree, but we're not going to disrespect each other. That's not a MAGA-mite. The MAGA hardcore, make America great, wear the cap, wear the underwear, wear everything. It's very difficult to have that kind of a conversation where you can agree to disagree, shake hands, and have a beer. That's the problem. You can't do that in a lot of places in the United States, and these are the ones that prop up Donald Trump and his presidency in terms of the votes and the red states. It's sad to see, but that's just the reality of the United States. And unfortunately, for the next minimum 4 years, Canada is going to have to constantly be on guard and try to forecast and predict what this megalomaniac who's suffering from dementia, what he's going to say or do next. Because let's call a spade a spade. When Donald Trump speaks, people have to listen. And when Donald Trump speaks, it doesn't necessarily have to make sense. And more often than not, it's damaging. So we have to pay attention to what he says. And I think Prime Minister Carney actually mentioned that in one of his recent interviews, that when Donald Trump speaks, we have to take him seriously. Whether it's a good thing or a bad thing coming out of his mouth, you have to listen to him seriously because he might drive it through. He might try to drive it through. And this whole rhetoric about Canada being the 51st state, the sad thing about it is, it would be good for America and it would be good for Canada. Who are you exactly speaking about? The billionaires of both countries? Or are you actually speaking about the American citizen or the Canadian citizen? So, for me to become an American citizen, what's in it for me? What do I get out of becoming an American citizen? Not a whole hell of a lot, to tell you the truth.
Nope.
I don't know about you, Gary, but I fail to see what I would get out of it being an American citizen. Not much.
Nope.
I'm pissed. Sorry.
Not at all. That's okay. Now, coming back to election night, the leaders of the three main parties in the race, there were some emotions as they spoke to supporters, not only gathered in their convention centers and such, but also across the country. And of course, Prime Minister Carney actually did raise the issue of Trump in his address to supporters. And we do have a little bit of a clip, just some highlights from the speech, not very long, but a few highlights that I thought were really significant and of interest to our viewers. And by the way, while we're playing that clip, if you have any thoughts at all, comments on the election and the outcome, or what you think drove the outcome so that we ended up with a majority or a minority government, by all means, put them in the comments below. We will share the comments with everyone. That's what we want. We want to hear from you. So put them in the comments and we will bring them up and respond to them as they come in. So here we go with Mark Carney.
I chose to enter politics because I felt we needed big changes in this country, but big changes guided by strong Canadian values. Values that I learned at the dinner table from my parents, Bob and Verley, and from my siblings. I appreciate this more in retrospect from my siblings. My siblings, Brenda, Sean, and Brian. Values that I learned on the ice from my coaches. Values that have been reinforced as I've met with Canadians across this great country. And those include three values that I want to highlight this evening. Humility. It's Canada after all. Ambition. It's Canada after all. And unity. It's Canada. President Trump is trying to break us so that America can own us. That will never ever happen. But we also must recognize the reality that our world has fundamentally changed. There is also, for me, as I stand before you this evening, humility in recognizing that, well, many have chosen to place your trust in me, trust in the Liberal Party. Millions of our fellow citizens preferred a different outcome. And my message to every Canadian is this: no matter where you live, no matter what language you speak, no matter how you voted, I will always do my best to represent everyone who calls Canada home.
He tackled the Trump issue head on in that speech, and very statesmanlike. And that's the one thing, if nothing else, that impresses me every time he gets behind a podium, or even just in a scrum. Very, very statesmanlike and businesslike, but statesmanlike. At more statesman than business, but you can see the foundations that he comes from, and he mentions the family and his his period of growing up, and it's interesting because he does it. You're going to see Polyev do it in the clip that I have of him, and even Singh mentions his mother, especially near the end of the clip that I have of Singh as well. So without further ado, let's have a listen to what Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre had to say on election night.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. It's with profound gratitude that I stand before you today at the moment of this historic election. Because only in Canada could the story that Anna and I bring to the stage be possible. Adopted son of school teachers and a Venezuelan refugee, stand on this stage in front of our proud country, offering ourselves up to serve for the future, after millions of people have shown up and marked their X, spoken their voice, and exercised their democratic rights. We could not be more proud, we could not be more grateful for the opportunity the Canadians have given us. Now, my message to Canadians. The promise that was made to me and to all of you is that anybody from anywhere could achieve anything, that through hard work, you could get a great life, you could have a nice, affordable home on a safe street. My purpose in politics is and will continue to be to restore that promise. We congratulate people from all political backgrounds on participating in the democratic process. And as I said, while we will do our constitutional duty of holding government to account and proposing better alternatives, we will always put Canada first as we stare down tariffs and other irresponsible threats from President Trump. Conservatives will work with the Prime Minister and all parties with the common goal of defending Canada's interests and getting a new trade deal that puts these tariffs behind us while protecting our sovereignty and the Canadian people.
Did you notice that he said we will work with the government? Oh, you're on mute.
Yes, when I watched when I listened to his speech, I picked up on that right away. you know what? That's what you would want to hear for somebody who at some point is going to head up the opposition. Because you know what? I'm really hoping that Pierre Poilievre sees what's at stake beyond his admiration of President Trump, and indirectly or directly has stated so. That he sees what's at stake here. It's Canada, and you know what? The other thing that I picked up from his speech is he spoke to people. He reached people, and I think that was genuinely lacking in the last 2 or 3 weeks of his campaign. He didn't really connect with people the way he was connecting with them before, especially when Trudeau was in charge. He managed somehow, he was connected to them, and he got I don't know what happened. He stopped listening to his campaign managers, or he just went off on his own way. He just stopped resonating with people, and both you and I saw a lot of that during the debate. Very rarely did he look into the camera. And it was all pretty much scripted dialogue at the debate, which didn't do him too good. I mean, it's unfortunate for him. It really is. But the fact that he says work with, it that encourages me, and that kind of is why I continue to be encouraged of what Canada is going to be up against and what Canada is going to overcome, with all major parties working together to overcome this difficult situation that's being perpetuated by the United States of America. So that was really reassuring to hear Mr. Poilievre say that.
To pick up on a point you made, Eddie, I think that even going into the campaign, his star was falling, and there were a couple of things at play. I think people were tired of hearing the slogans, the name calling, and hearing the anger, and nothing really in between to show that yes, I am or was the prime minister in waiting. Because I think especially in the final days of the campaign, the internal polling showed them that, first of all, they went from a double-digit lead, 20 points,
Yeah.
and squandered that. And the polling was showing them that even though they were closing the gap, and they did close the gap, by a couple of points, and if the campaign had gone on another 2 or 3 days, it might have even been closer than what it is now. But but it, you're right, in the debate, it was more the same as what you saw in the House of Commons, only toned down a bit. Except at the end, he had an emotional moment when he talked about meeting different people from all walks of life across the country during the campaign. And, we talked about that before, why they didn't grab that clip. And there were a couple of conservative pundits that were surprised that they didn't grab that clip and really hammer it on social media and in their ads, because that showed a whole other side of Poilievre. And I think they squandered that opportunity. Their lead, he was prime minister in waiting for almost 2 years, it seemed. It just went on and on and on. But he didn't act the part, especially coming into the leadership campaign for the Liberals, where he saw that he was going up against somebody who had more of a statesman-like approach.
Correct.
and business-like approach. There was no real pivot there. And then in the back rooms, as you heard what happened with Jim Houston in Nova Scotia, the premier, getting the call from Jenny Byrne, Poilievre's campaign manager, and saying, like, when we win, Nova Scotia's not going to get a dime.
Yeah.
Really? Seriously? And this, Pierre, and maybe you didn't have a choice in who was going to handle the campaign. That could very well be too. Who knows? But that party needs to really, really take a hard look inward. And it doesn't take very much to figure out how they went wrong and where they went wrong, and how Poilievre squandered one of the largest leads in popularity that I can remember,
Yeah.
and
But you know
even
what?
lost his own seat by 5,000 votes.
Yeah, yeah. You know what? At the same time, Gary, you got to look at. I think there was quite a few articles today, and if you looked at, you know, ABC or NBC or anything like that, from the states, um, a lot of what's being brought up is how influential was Comrade Trump in the Canadian election without directly interfering with it, except for his rhetoric, right? You know, in my opinion, quite significant because let's take the Trump picture out of the equation here, okay? And
Hmm.
Justin Trudeau resigned just the same, and you have Prime Minister Carney up and up, neck and neck with Pierre Poilievre, without the Trump factor in here. Do you really think that Poilievre would have lost his 20 points had it not been for Trump and his rhetoric and his tariffs, and I think more so his threats to annex Canada to the United States? Had he not said any of that, had he not existed, I don't think that Poilievre would have lost the points that he did from that 20 because Trump had a direct influence in terms of bringing Canadians together. I mean, it was a joke that you and I brought up, and we've seen this joke. How bad can it be that you'd actually get Quebecers be part of the Canadian movement to keep us as a sovereign nation? So, you know what? Indirectly, President Trump is to blame for, in my opinion, Pierre Poilievre's collapse, or there was a lot to do with it. And that's just allowing a statesman, as you said, allowing a world-renowned financier to defend the country. And you know what? As human beings, we tend to levitate towards people that vehemently defend the sovereignty of a country. In this particular case, not in a military sense, but by the same token, you know, we're attacked economically by the United States, and we have had somebody who's been in a live interview since he took over from Prime Minister Trudeau that he is quite capable in defending our sovereignty and continue to move the country forward with alternate solutions to the United States. So yeah, at the end of the day, Prime Minister Carney has been in a live interview ever since he became Prime Minister, taking over from Justin Trudeau. Remarkable, absolutely remarkable, and I'm sure there are going to be a lot of political strategists and people writing about this for years and years to come. I mean, what a shit show, turning everything into a success story up here. And you know what? If Mr. Poilievre and Prime Minister Carney, and especially Pierre Blanchette from the Bloc Québécois can work together well, especially when it comes to the best interests of Canada and not necessarily the best interest of a particular region of the country, being Quebec, Western Canada, whatnot, I think we'll be okay. And I think at some point you had mentioned sometimes a minority government may not such be a bad thing because of the increased checks and balance points, which does not exist in the United States right now. But up here in Canada, if you keep people honest and you look at good political leaders that have the best interest in the country together, debating what's best for the country and let's move forward, that's not necessarily a bad thing. You know, not that we end up being a society like the United States is by any measure. But still, it's good to have those checks and balances. So I would have preferred a majority government myself as well. Either way, one way or the other, conservative, liberal. But you know what we have, and I know that Prime Minister Carney is going to make do with the best of it for sure.
Now, on
I have
the
no,
other side, yeah, on the other side of it, Eddie,
yeah,
as much as we're talking about Polyev and how he lost that solid lead, it started with Trudeau's resignation in early January, where the Liberals started to bounce back and enter Mark Carney, and even before the leadership vote was completed, Mark Carney was on the way up in the public eye, and when
hmm
he won the leadership, that really seemed to solidify Liberal fortunes turning around. And
yeah,
any way you look at it, as much as Poilievre's downward spiral was somewhat amazing to watch. I mean, it's just unbelievable. By the same token, Carney and the Liberals and the bounce back that they managed to do and pull, where they were, trying to save the furniture, and that was it, back to here they are in power, 3 seats short of a majority. And it's, that in itself is amazing as well. Yeah. Now, on the other side, the third side of it all is the New Democratic Party. And it was not a good election campaign.
Let's not forget them.
Yeah, and not a good night for the New Democratic Party and its leader, Jagmeet Singh.
I want to take a moment to congratulate Prime Minister Carney on his victory. He has an important job to do to represent all Canadians and to protect our country and its sovereignty from the threats of Donald Trump. Tonight and every night, all of us here, we're on Team Canada. We want Canada to thrive, and we're going to continue to fight for Canada. I want to congratulate all the other leaders on a hard-fought campaign. It's been the honor of my life to represent the people of Burnaby Central. Tonight, they chose a new member of Parliament, and I wish them well as they continue to work hard for this community. We make room for everyone because we believe that there is enough wealth in Canada for all of us to live the life that we deserve. I often speak about something my mom taught me. It's a Sikh teaching of Chardi Kala. And this is something fundamental to who I am. And it means, the words break down, Chardi means rising and Kala means spirits. And it's something that it captures a big part of who I am. And it's the idea that in the fight for justice, in the fight for fairness, in the fight that we fight, we want to have optimism in the face of struggle. We want to have a defiant optimism. It's like this eternal resilience. And this is the spirit that I carry tonight. Obviously, I'm disappointed that we could not win more seats, but I'm not disappointed in our movement. I'm hopeful for our party. I know that we will always choose hope over fear and optimism over despair and unity over hate. New Democrats built this country. We have built the best of Canada, and we aren't going anywhere.
So again, referring back to his mother, all three of them have mentioned their families and their starts in life. Jagmeet was very emotional in that speech. A couple of times he was very, very close to breaking down, thanking his campaign team, thanking his caucus, and then thanking the workers in his office, his constituency office. Mm-hmm. Really, really very emotional. So I don't know, I'm sure he's going to look at the deal that he had with the Liberals and try and figure out in the long run, was it a good thing? May not have been a good thing for the party, but as he was pointing out during the campaign, he believed, and New Democrats believed, that what they managed to get out of it with the dental program and the child care program and a couple of things like that, what they did was in the best interest of Canadians in general.
Right.
And you know what? You can't fault them for that. That's for sure. Now, on the other side of it, during the campaign, in the dying days of the campaign, Bloc Québécois leader Yves-François Blanchet had something really eye-opening and disturbing to say, and I want to play that particular clip just to remind us of sometimes, as much as there are things that he has said in the past that I think, you know what? He does have a point. I totally get where he's coming from. This particular comment, and I've softened my thought a little bit about it, but still, this particular comment, my initial reaction to you in a text exchange we had about it was, the wolf in sheep's clothing has finally appeared. Yeah. And, so let's just have a quick glance at what he had to say that day.
We are, either we like it or not, part of an artificial country with very little meaning called Canada. Many people in Canada write to me and say, we'd like to have the same as Quebec has. As long as we're part of it and we get elected in this parliament, we are entitled to any right and privilege and opportunity being provided by the persons who vote. And I will relinquish none of them. And if it's a foreign parliament because this nation is not mine, I don't feel more at ease in the Canadian Parliament than Mrs. Smith would feel at ease in the Assemblée nationale du Québec.
This
I'm
nation.
putting my cap back on. I'm sorry.
Yeah. I probably have a few choice words, but I will
That
just,
was heavy.
yeah, yeah. When you really listen to it, yeah, I don't feel like Canada is a part of me, or I'm a part of Canada. But you know what? Damn it all, I have rights to this, and I'll just keep taking as long as you're there and giving.
Well, you know what? Look, I mean, the Bloc Québécois has no love lost for the rest of the country. And, quite frankly, which is sad, it doesn't actually bode very well in creating a very positive image of Quebecers for the rest of the country when you have a statement like that coming out. I mean, I'm a lifelong Quebecer. You're adopted Quebecer here, living here for the last 3 or 4 years, Gary. You really don't want your leaders speaking like that while we're all in a major confederation, a world leader called Canada. You don't say stuff like that. And you know what? My tax dollars and your tax dollars and the rest of the tax dollars throughout the country are paying the salaries of these 20 plus elected parliamentarians to be on the floor, to be in the House of Commons. And when you hear talk like that, you kind of wonders, like, what are you doing representing Canada anyway? This is supposed to be, the Parliament is supposed to be a chamber and a body for all Canadians and Quebecers, and Mr. Blanchet and his people are part of that, but not when you start looking at your own provincial agenda and pushing that forward at the expense of the rest of the country, the rest of the provinces, and the rest of the citizens of Canada. So, very, very inappropriate statement. And I'm going to grab on one thing that you had said. Before the debate, we've talked about it. We talked about him before over coffee, saying, "Wow, this guy." You know what? You got to listen to what he has to say. He's making sense. I think you and I had quite a few chuckles during the debate, and some of the things he was actually very, very clear, poignant, and right during the debate. And then to go out after all of this is over to say something like that, wrong, wrong, wrong. You just put Quebec, in my opinion, you put Quebecers back 10 steps in the eyes of the rest of Canada just by that stupid remark. I mean, and it is a stupid remark.
And at a time, I tried to cut the guy some slack the other day when you and I were exchanging texts, when I said, it could be frustration and fatigue both from the campaign and the way the campaign was going, because he did win his seat, but there was speculation he was going to lose it, and then they dropped a fair chunk of seats, and he knew that they were going to lose probably a substantial number of seats just from their own internal polling as well. So frustration and fatigue, but that he's been around a long time. He's not a newbie, and you temper your remarks. You catch yourself. If you're the leader, that's called leadership. You temper your remarks, and yeah. Anyway.
Well, you know what? At the end of the day, this election, there was more, let's say in the province of Quebec, right? For the Bloc Québécois, yes, they lost, what did you say, 12, 13 seats, right? They lost 13 seats. And if you ask me, why did they lose 13 seats? Is the movement for Quebec um, any less important for Quebec constituents before and after the election? No. Before Donald Trump? No. I think what's happened here with the Bloc Québécois and the province of Quebec, Canada became more important. Quebec in Canada became more important because of the existential threat from the United States. So I think Quebecers put their Bloc Québécois and the Quebec nation caps on the side and thought about Canada and the survivability of Quebec within Canada to fight against the United States. I think that's where that protest vote went. So if they would have had 33 seats as part of a major protest vote, and as Bloc Québécois since they became a political party, a protest vote, great, fine. You know what? That's fine. That's called representation. That's the way our elections work here, and that's the way we're set up. And you know what? Frustration for him, absolutely. But I don't think he's a stupid man. He knows damn well that these 13 seats can invariably come back to the Bloc Québécois once all this crap with the United States at some point passes. So I guess cooler heads prevailed, and Quebecers voted with what was most important to them. And it just wasn't, unfortunately, in those 13 electorates all about Quebec. It became all about Canada. And again, thank you, Mr. Trump, right?
Yeah, exactly. Joe writes, I sure hope PP can drop his combative rhetoric going forward. If I took a swig every time I heard the term the lost liberal decade, I'd be a blackout drunk. There's a little bit of a conversation going on here because Monel comes back and says, oh, bring that back in. There we go. Hey, Joe, I completely agree. Had a hard time with the debate because of that statement. And Joe comes along too with, hi, Monel. With the ongoing threat from our neighbor to the south, we need full solidarity going forward. I agree with Gary that I was also disappointed with the minority government. Joe, thank you for the comments. Monel, thanks for the comment and the conversation going on in the chat. That's what eventually I really hope to see happening on a regular basis while we're doing the live stream for sure. Get more people talking to one another and talking with us and having just a great conversation right across the country and around the world, because that's the total possibility of it all.
Well, we're looking at a British Columbia conversation with a Quebec conversation right now.
Exactly. Yeah. There you go. Okay, so let's talk about the voter turnout for a moment. In the fact that right now Elections Canada said that we had 68.7% of eligible voters actually cast a ballot in this election. How does that compare? In 2021, 62.2% cast ballots. In 2019, it was 67%. In 2015, 68.3%. In 2011, 61.1%, and in 2008, 58.8%. The highest turnout historically was the Canadian federal election back in 1958. 79.4% of eligible voters actually cast a ballot, and I believe that was a solid majority government for Prime Minister John Diefenbaker, Conservative leader at the time. The lowest turnout was in 2008, and that was the 58.8% for that election. The 2025 turnout reflects a notable resurgence in voter participation, aligning, I should say, with heightened political engagement observed in the 2015 election. So, there you have it, from the highest to the lowest, and actually, we're almost at 70%. I would have loved to have seen us hit 70% or even 71%, but it was a solid turnout, and we had a really, 7.3 million people voting, a record number, voting in the advanced polls, in which we talked about last week, where I think you're going to see more people doing that. The one thing that bugged me on election night more than anything else was the fact that here we are, a G7 country in the 21st century, and they're still counting ballots by hand?
Pencil and paper.
Yeah,
Well, you know
yeah,
what, Gary? I think we talked about this briefly the last show.
yeah.
Okay, counting ballots in pencil and paper. Let's look at some of the chaos down south. You have some places using pencil and paper. You have other places using computerized system, which anybody can pretty much access in a lot of cases. Especially when you have the Elon Musks of the world that are actually, you know, influencing that particular piece of technology. You know what? So I have no problem with keep it simple, stupid, if it can be kept honest. And the way we do it here is you have one person counting, and you have a person watching the person counting, and then you have somebody tallying it at the end of the day. That makes sure that what has been counted is actually accurate. You know what? Sometimes, Gary, keep it simple, stupid makes perfect sense to me. I guess that's just me. If I was casting a ballot electronically, the one thing that would be coming into my mind is, okay, um, is there any manipulation in the technology that has changed my vote or eliminated my vote? I'd always have that question in the back of my mind, especially from what I'm seeing down south. So I'm okay with the pencil and paper. I know you're more of I was a techie my entire life. I will go pencil and paper with elections. No problem. Thank you.
Okay. Up next, the aftershock. What can we expect with the swearing in of the Liberal minority government? A lot of people are looking for Canadian solutions for things like web page and domain hosting. WHC, Web Hosting Canada, is just that, and based here in Montreal with an expanding network of servers across the country. And their customer service is excellent. I know they have been hosting all of my domains, including Night Talk, for 4 years without an issue. There is an affiliate link in the description below, so you can go have a look for yourself. So let's have a look at the aftershock. Now that the dust is settling, what comes next? What could change as far as potential coalitions or instability, party leadership futures, all of those sorts of things. Any thoughts along those lines?
No, not really. I mean, I was just looking at some of the Elections Canada results in terms of cabinet, people in cabinet actually losing their portfolios from the Liberal Party per se. I think there was only one person that actually lost their seat that was part of the cabinet. I can't remember exactly where that's from. Just give me a second. In my note here, I have it jotted down. Oh, that just doesn't come to me right now. Yeah, there was just one person in cabinet that actually did not make it out of the election, out of the entire Liberal portfolio, and I think that's just quite remarkable. And some of the heavy hitters that were part of Trudeau's and then Carney's cabinet are all still there. So that's not necessarily a bad thing, and it all depends on who Mr. Carney puts in charge, right? In terms of moving forward. I mean, is he going to give Krista Freeland a significant mandate, Melanie Joly a significant mandate? I forget her name, the former speaker. She also won her riding. What kind of portfolios are these individuals going to get? And you know what? The more experience you can bring in from previous administrations in terms of the do's and don'ts, I know a lot of the pundits are going to say, oh, you know what, these people were part of the Trudeau cabinet, and look at what Trudeau did, and yada yada, so on and so forth. Well, you know what? Trudeau's the prime minister. He's the leader of the party. People will toe the political line until a certain point, and you've seen that with Chrystia Freeland when she basically said, "I've had enough." You know what? To me, I think that would be positive experience within a Liberal cabinet for Canada moving forward. So you know what, Mr. Carney, if there was any suggestion a citizen and a voter can make to you, put in as much experience as you possibly could behind you to support you to move your agendas forward.
And he knows a number of the players within the cabinet. he had a chance to work with them for what, a week to 10 days when he
Yes.
put together his own cabinet at the time. And, so you have players like Melanie Joly, who has a lot of experience, certainly, especially with the foreign affairs portfolio. And then you have Dominique LeBlanc, who is at least for Trudeau, was the fixer, the minister of everything. If something went wrong, he'd call on Dominique to go in and clean it up. So you can't ignore that kind of experience in the cabinet. Chrystia Freeland is a good friend of Carney's, and she has the experience both in negotiating the first new agreement during Trump's first term, what he called the best deal ever, the greatest deal, no deal like it. And then a couple of years later, almost like, who negotiated this? Not me. Yeah. So there are two or three other names too that we could throw out there with a lot of experience in the cap. And they were, despite what was going on with the leader of the day, they were good, solid cabinet ministers. They knew their files. They handled them well. They handled themselves well in the House under fire from the Conservatives and the NDP. And they, handled themselves well in scrums, with the media. So, he has some. Yes, they're the same faces that were there 6 months ago. However, they have a different leader. They have a new mandate, if you will, and a whole new outlook on life. And sometimes, like when you're down and out, and all of a sudden you're given that second chance, like they've been handed, you come back, you realize, oh yeah, okay, can't blow it this time for sure. And despite you pulling with everything you had in the past and trying to shore up the leadership, you don't have to shore up the leadership this time. Just guide him a bit, maybe, because he's a political newbie. But by the same token, you just do your job effectively the way you've done it in the past, and we might be surprised overall by just how solid this Liberal government can turn out to be.
Well, during the Liberal leadership race, right, when we watched them vie for the leadership of the Liberal Party, I'm not sure which one of us mentioned it, but we both kind of nodded our heads in agreement during one of our shows. Regardless of who won the Liberal leadership, can you imagine the rest of the candidates joined in and formed Team Canada, regardless of who won? This is exactly where we're sitting right now, Gary. We have Carney, who won the Liberal leadership, became de facto Prime Minister of Canada, just won the election in Canada, albeit a minority government. And he's got all of these people that were vying for his position, winning their ridings. What better way to have some significant momentum where he spent time with them as opponents while they were running for the Liberal seat, the head of the Liberal seat. I'm sure he got to know them personally through those exchanges. He understands what their strengths and weaknesses are because, during his campaign run for the Liberal leadership, all of his campaign managers know what the strengths and weaknesses are of these individuals because that's what his opponents were doing with him. And not only that, they continue to remain loyal to the Liberal Party of Canada. Most of them had they all had portfolios actually, and experience. And I think, Carney was able to distance himself from Trudeau and the old Liberal Party of Justin Trudeau. And I think, by them joining his front benchers, his cabinet, they'll be able to do that too, to disassociate themselves with the Trudeau era. I say bring him on board. The man's got nothing to lose, and I think they'd make an excellent group of people to be part of Team Canada in terms of moving us forward at this very difficult time. it just occurred to me. I'm actually quite excited by this. And just for our viewers, I actually found that line. There was one cabinet minister that was part of the previous Liberal cabinet, lost. The minister's name was Kamal Kera of Brampton West. That individual lost their seat.
Wow.
But other than that, yeah,
Yeah.
this is exciting times. I'm pretty comfortable.
Well, I can't wait. I haven't heard yet how soon he plans to pick his cabinet and unveil it. With the swearing in, I haven't heard any dates tossed around yet. I believe the House is set to come back in late May, so maybe he'll do it. He'll take next week, maybe part of the week after, to go through, line up the cabinet, and then set up the swearing in with the GG, and then get down to business prior to late May. So there's a budget that has to be brought in. Well, a throne speech, a budget. It's going to be a busy sitting leading up to the summer break. And who knows, maybe it'll turn out that they don't get a summer break.
A very short break at max.
Yeah. You'll remember Poilievre said, was it last week at one stop? He said that if the Conservatives win, or no, when I form government, don't plan on having a summer holiday. We're going to be going straight through the summer because there are 3 key pieces of legislation from our platform I want passed.
Yeah.
So, okay, well, Pierre, you've opened up the door. Maybe Carney's going to jump in and take advantage of your willingness to work through the summer in the House. So,
Gary, think of it. Do you think Canada can take a break for this summer with all that crap going on down south?
Nope.
We have new business and the rest of the planet to contend with the rest of the planet to contend with. That shit show down south is not going to stop for us taking a break up here in Canada. So you know what? I really hope that that common sense prevails with Mr. Carney, and we work on, we carry on. Take a short week break. That's it. Everybody back to work, and that's about the extent of it. Because that showdown, that circus down in the United States is a 7x24 circuit and circus, and will continue doing so. Even if Trump takes his weekly vacation and spends $50 million for every golf trip he takes down in Florida, his clowns are still running the show and doing things. So no, we can't stop up here, at least for the immediate future. We got to keep working.
No, and there are 2 things in particular. The first thing is keep pushing forward with the interprovincial trade barriers. And of course, Carney has made the commitment that federally, any federal barriers will be removed as of July 1st. But he also has to keep encouraging the provinces to get their acts together and move quickly to get the provincial barriers down. Totally.
That's an important one.
Yeah, and also be over knocking on the EU's door, and down to Australia and New Zealand as well, and other trading partners in Southeast Asia. We might as well get those links opened up and get solid agreements in place. And if the U.S. wants to kind of withdraw and be insular, then so be it. Go ahead. Run around looking at each other's belly button or at your own belly button while the world around you blossoms.
Yes. Yeah. Looking forward to blossoming.
Yeah. Okay. So coming up, the NHL playoffs update with Eddie. But first, a quick reminder, if you are enjoying our live stream and want to show your support, you can buy us a coffee. Just click the link in the description below. Eddie and I will enjoy the coffee, and thank you for your support. Well, here we go, the NHL playoffs roundup, something that a lot of people are waiting for, Eddie. We're getting deep into the first rounds of the NHL playoffs, and our resident Habs fan has the latest on what's happening. Take it away, Eddie.
Well, very quickly, Gary. I mean, I've got my Canadians cap on. I've got my playoff beard going. The Canadians are still in the playoffs, yes. Albeit they're playing tonight. They're down 3-1 to the Washington Capitals. They're playing tonight. I have no idea what the score is, so I'm keeping my fingers crossed. But Habs fans, I'm sorry to say it's going to be a tough grind for the Canadians to come out of that cellar. And if there was a defining point, Gary, that I made last week on the show, that the Canadian players are giving up too much height and too much weight, in Game 4, the Canadians were up 2-1, and we had 225-pound, 6'3" Tom Wilson plow over Alexander Carrier, who's 5'11" and 175 pounds soaking wet, completely destroyed him and got him off the puck. And on the same play, the Washington Capitals scored a goal 2-2. Canadians have not looked the same since then. So, when your players are giving up 20 to 30 pounds on average on the ice, that's a little tough to come by, although the Canadians have been playing really good hockey, fast hockey. Small young team, they are going to be great moving forward. So Canadians are down 3-1. They're playing tonight, and hopefully they can pull off a miracle. Elsewhere in the National Hockey League, we have Vegas leading Minnesota 3-2. Carolina just defeated New Jersey 4-1 to advance to the next round. Dallas and Colorado. Dallas is leading 3-2. Tampa and Florida. Florida is leading 3-1. Now, of interest, of course, is our Canadian teams, right? Winnipeg and St. Louis are tied 2-2 after Winnipeg lifted off to a 2-0 win. They play tomorrow. The Edmonton Oilers, yes, sir, the Edmonton Oilers. They were down 2-0 against Los Angeles, and McDavid and the rest of the clan have roared back, and they lead 3-2 after a game yesterday. And Gary, Ottawa and Toronto. Well. How things maybe don't change very much for the Toronto fans. Maybe they're still going to be going into year since 1967, rebuilding. Toronto was up 2-0, and they had a commanding control of the series until Ottawa has won the last 2 games. Toronto has not been able to close them off. Well. Is it going to be same old, where Toronto's going to lose 4 straight? Last time they did that was against the Montreal Canadiens, of course, 3 or 4 years back when Canadians made it to the Stanley Cup final. You know what? I really hope for Toronto's sake that this does not happen again, where the core 4 start imploding when the game really gets serious. So really interesting. I'm looking forward to seeing that particular matchup tomorrow. If Toronto doesn't close it off tomorrow, my friend, I'm sorry. It's going to be the fat lady singing for Toronto when it comes to Game 7. So, you know what? My hopes are up for the Montreal Canadiens. I hope Toronto can actually do it this year. But
Do you think they can, though, really?
I don't know. I watched some of the replays this morning. They lost 4-0 to the Ottawa Senators last night. They were manhandled. The core 4 were nowhere to be seen, which is typically the problem when the going gets tough. These 4 guys just seem to disappear. So we're just going to have to wait and see. And I'm sorry I'm laughing, but holy smokes, guys, come on.
If you're a Maple Leafs fan, what else can you do?
Oh man. But yeah, you know what? I hope the Canadians can pull this one off. I'm not sure how far they're going to go. If not this year, they're going to be a much better and a much bigger team next year. So they did say it was a 5-year plan to make it into the playoffs. They actually did it in year 3. So hats off to the Canadians management. And let's hope Toronto can pull this off. And you know what? Go Edmonton, go Winnipeg. All our Canadian teams are still in there. Somebody's going to end up losing. We might just end up with Winnipeg, Edmonton, and Ottawa going into the next round. We'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. All right, Eddie, thanks for that, I think. Well, Canada has voted and the ground has shifted. And as the dust settles, one thing is clear. We're not going back to politics as usual. The story doesn't end with the results. The new chapter is just the beginning. Thank you for joining us. Remember to like, subscribe, share, and leave a comment below. If you're watching later, we will respond, and it does help our channel to grow. Night Talk returns in 7 days. From Montreal, I'm Gary MacDonald. Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, Eddie.
Good night.